My name is Eleanor Grace Whitfield, though almost everyone calls me Ellie. I was born in a small town in Ohio, a place where the wheat fields stretched toward the horizon, where farmhouses leaned a little with age, and where people knew more about each other's business than they perhaps should have. It was the kind of town where Sunday church was both ritual and rehearsal, where friendships were carried by generations, and where the idea of ambition often stopped at the county line. I work really hard to make videos for you all, so please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Also, make sure to tell me your name and where you are watching this story from. Let's start the story. I never really fit there. Or at least, that's how I felt growing up. While other girls embraced lives their mothers once lived, waiting for high school sweethearts to propose, dreaming of cozy kitchens and back porches, I was restless. I wanted more. My mother, bless her, often said I was born with a restless heart, and perhaps she was right. But if I tell you my story only as a tale of a small-town girl aching for the city lights, you'd miss the truth of it. This isn't only about me. It is about him. And him, and me. It's about love that faltered, pride that fractured, and second chances that sometimes arrive wrapped in irony. His name was Matthew Cole, and the first time I saw him, he was wearing hand-me-down jeans too short by an inch and shoes that had clearly belonged to someone older. He was lanky, awkward, the son of a factory worker and a diner waitress, and he carried that raw humility with him everywhere he went. People looked at him and saw poor boy. I looked at him and saw someone who made me laugh until my ribs ached. But sometimes laughter isn't enough. Sometimes, when the world whispers to you that you deserve more, you start to believe it. And that whisper can change everything. I was 22 when Matthew asked me to marry him. He had saved for months out of his paycheck from fixing cars, and the ring he presented in a small velvet box wasn't much, just a simple gold band with a modest stone. I should have seen the devotion in his eyes, the courage it took for him to ask me, the raw faith he put into my yes. Instead, all I saw was the ring size compared to the glittering diamonds I'd watched other girls flash on social media. And yes, I said yes. I said yes because I loved him, though I sometimes doubted if love, barren, unembellished, was enough. But the cracks were already forming before the proposal was done. It wasn't that Matthew lacked ambition, in fact, he brimmed with it. He dreamed of opening his own business someday, of proving himself. But dreams take time, and patience was never something I wore well. Our engagement exposed me. I wanted him to rise, to prove not just to himself but to the whole world that he wasn't just the poor mechanic's son. And sometimes, when my frustrations got the best of me, I let the truth slip. You embarrass me, Matt. Look at the company we keep now, look at the world I want. Can't you see how you drag me back? I can still remember the look in his eyes when I said that. He didn't yell, didn't fight back. He just went quiet, his silence heavier than any anger would have been. Days later, the ring was back in its box, and we walked our separate ways. He left town not long after. Some said he was going to Cincinnati, others whispered about New York. None of us knew for sure. As for me, I stayed back, scraping together a career in marketing, climbing slowly yet madly, trying to prove, to myself, to anyone watching, that I had made the right choice. But life has a way of circling back, bringing with it truths you thought you'd left behind. 5 years later, I was standing in a tall glass building in downtown Chicago, where I had clawed my way into the world of advertising. I was dressed in clothes that cost more than the annual income of some of the families I grew up around. I was proud, yes, but also tired. The city is loud, unrelenting, and success tastes different when you bite into it alone. That evening, a coworker invited me to a networking gala. A lot of new blood from the tech world will be there, she said. You need to meet them. Big opportunities. I went, of course. I always went. Success is not inherited, it is hunted. And that is where I saw him. Matthew Cole. Not lanky anymore. Not awkward. Not poor. He strode into the room in a tailored suit that looked as though it had been made for the man he had grown to be rather than the boy I had once known. His smile carried confidence, his handshake with others carried respect. And people, powerful people, leaned toward him when he spoke, as though hungry to catch every word. He was no longer just Matthew Cole, son of a factory worker. He was Matthew Cole, founder of Tech, a rising star in software solutions, whispered about in news articles and analyzed in business journals. And he had done it all himself. No handouts. No shortcuts. When his eyes finally landed on me across the ballroom, I felt something I hadn't in years. My pulse raced. My face burned. And in his glance, calm, unreadable, I realized a truth that nearly crushed me. I had once told him he embarrassed me. Now, standing there, it was me who felt the weight of embarrassment. I wish I could tell you that courage led me across that ballroom floor, but the truth is far less flattering. It was pride, and maybe desperation, that nudged my heels forward, step by faltering step, until I stood within arm's reach of him. Matthew, I said, my voice cracking just slightly under the weight of his name. He turned smoothly, like he had expected me all along. His eyes, a shade darker than I remembered, met mine without hesitation. They didn't shine with recognition, excitement, or bitterness. They were steady, polite, infuriatingly calm. Ellie, he said. Not Eleanor, not Grace, not even the affectionate nicknames he used to invent for me. Just Ellie. Simple, clipped. A name that now sounded like a formality. You look different, I managed, though the word different didn't even begin to grasp the transformation before me. He was polished, refined, a man who belonged to these glittering rooms I had spent years trying to claw my way into. I'd hope so, he said with a half-smile, lifting his glass of champagne. It has been some time. Some time. As though 5 years were a shrug, as though those years hadn't stretched endlessly in the quiet chambers of my mind, where I often wondered if I had made the wrong choice. I was surprised to see you here, I admitted. Chicago isn't home for you. No, he said evenly. But business takes me many places now. His words settled deep in me. Business takes me many places now. The boy who once counted pennies for gas money was now a man who crossed cities for deals, who shook hands in rooms where decisions worth millions were signed with a flourish. I wanted to ask him everything, how he had done it, where he had gone, who had stood by his side. But my pride wouldn't let me. Instead, I lifted my chin, trying to conjure the version of myself I wanted him to see. I've done well, too, I said. Advertising. I'm an account manager now. He nodded. Polite. Distant. Unmoved. And in that moment, I realized the cruelest irony of them all. I had left him because I wanted someone who belonged to this world I was chasing. And now, he was that man. And I was the outsider, fumbling for words that would make me seem worthy of being remembered. Over the following weeks, I found reasons, excuses, really, to cross paths with him. Networking events. Professional mixers. Even a few charity auctions. He was everywhere, or maybe he was simply everywhere I allowed my eyes to go. Each time, he treated me with the same measured civility. Never cold, never warm. It was like being acknowledged by a polite stranger. And yet, he remembered small things, my distaste for red wine, my habit of tapping my fingernails against glass when nervous, and those tiny memories dangled hope in front of me like a cruel trick. Finally, during a fundraiser for an education nonprofit, I did what seemed desperate even as I smiled to disguise the tremor in my voice. Would you have dinner with me, Matthew? I asked. Just to catch up. Nothing more. He studied me for a beat too long, long enough for me to feel the heat of shame rising into my cheeks. But then he nodded. Dinner then. But only dinner. It was not the yes I wanted, but it was a yes nonetheless. We chose a quiet restaurant tucked away in a neighborhood far from the glitter of downtown. He arrived on time, dressed not in the expensive armor of a business suit but in something simpler, dark jeans, a button-down rolled at the sleeves. This was closer to the Matthew I remembered, though tempered by the confidence of the man he had become. I tried to fill the silence with chatter about my work, my apartment, the city itself. But he listened with the patience of someone who has long since learned the difference between noise and meaning. At last, I asked what had burned in me since the night at the gala. How did you do it? I mean, everything. The company. The success. He sipped from his glass of water before answering. I worked. I failed 100 times. I learned from everyone who underestimated me. And eventually, I stopped caring about proving myself to others. Not even to me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His gaze was steady, unflinching. Especially not to you. The words struck hard, but they were not cruel. They were simply true. And that truth unraveled me more than any anger could. I had left him because I doubted his worth. But he had risen, not because of me, not even in spite of me, he had risen because he finally believed in himself. He set down his fork and leaned slightly back. Ellie, I don't hold a grudge. Honestly, I should thank you. Losing you forced me to face myself. But the man I am now, his life doesn't leave space for the kind of doubts you once had about me. I felt tears prick at the corner of my eyes, but I swallowed them back. For years, I had convinced myself that when I saw Matthew again, he would still belong to me. Instead, I was discovering he might never have belonged to me in the first place. That night after dinner, I went back to my apartment and sat in the dark. The city hummed outside my window, sirens, car horns, clattering voices far below, but inside, the silence pressed against me. I took off my heels, placed them neatly beside the couch, and let myself collapse like a marionette whose strings had finally been cut. I thought of the boy in the too short jeans, the man with the velvet box in trembling hands, the steady gaze he'd once reserved only for me. I thought of the words I had flung at him, those callous, poisonous words, "You embarrass me." Now, with everything reversed, regret crawled down my throat like glass. I told myself that people change, that maybe I had changed. But the truth was simpler, and far harder to face. I had not changed at all. I still wanted what Matthew had become. I still wanted him. But this time, he was not mine to reach for. Weeks later, fate, or perhaps irony, showed me the proof. I was walking through Grant Park one bright Saturday morning when I saw him again. Not in a suit this time, not even in his reserved dinner attire. He was in casual clothes, a baseball cap pulled low, a relaxed man who smiled more openly than I had seen in years. And beside him was a woman. She was tall, elegant, with auburn hair that caught the morning light and a laugh that rang clear enough to drown out every thought in my head. She was holding his hand as though it fit there naturally, as though it had always belonged. I froze, watching as he bent to say something in her ear, making her laugh again. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder, an intimate, unthinking gesture of comfort that pierced me deeper than anything he had said at dinner. He had moved on. Completely, irrevocably. And this was his world now, where love was not a weight, where his worth was no longer in question. I turned away before they could see me. My chest hurt with the kind of ache that no career success, no city skyline, no finely polished life could erase. For days afterward, I drowned myself in work. Extra projects. Late nights. The glow of my office computer became a bomb, the hum of emails and meetings a shield against the pain clawing inside. But every shield cracks if you lean on it too long. One evening, while walking home along the river, I heard a street musician playing an old love ballad. The melody was soft, unhurried, the kind you only hear when life slows down enough to listen. And suddenly, I couldn't stop the tears from coming. For the first time, I admitted the full truth to myself. I didn't simply miss Matthew. I missed the version of myself I had been with him, the girl who laughed freely, who believed love didn't need to be wrapped in glitter to count. I had traded that girl for ambition, had stripped away her innocence for the illusion of shine. And in doing so, I had lost something more precious than anything the city's lights could offer. A month later, grasping at threads of courage, or perhaps only desperation, I reached out. I sent him an email, careful and deliberate. Matthew, I've been thinking a lot about us. Could we talk one more time? Not about the past, but about now. About what might still be. I hovered over the send button. My hands shook. It felt foolish, humiliating even, but also necessary. Because without this, I would always wonder. 2 days later, a reply came. Ellie, I respect the courage it took to write this. But the life I live now has moved far beyond what we once shared. I don't wish you ill, in fact, I hope you find happiness. But that happiness won't be with me. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. They were kind. They were final. They were the closing of a door I had once slammed myself but now found locked from the other side. It took time, I won't pretend otherwise. For months, I carried the sharpness of rejection like a stone in my chest. But slowly, the stone wore smooth. Slowly, the edges dulled. I began to understand that this was not the end of my story, only the end of his chapter in it. Matthew Cole would forever be the man who taught me the cost of pride. He would forever remind me that love should never be a transaction of status, but a quiet steadfastness, a belief in one another. I had lost him. That wound would remain. But perhaps, in losing him, I had found the truths about myself I had tried so long to outrun. For the first time in years, I returned to Ohio, to the little town I once fled. I walked the fields, let the wind ripple through my hair, listened to the creak of the old farmhouse doors. And there I found a piece of the girl I thought was gone. I would carry regret, yes. But I would also carry hope, that one day, I might love again. And this time, if fortune ever gave me another chance, I would not let misplaced ambition turn love into ashes. Because I know now, the humblest beginnings often grow into the truest stories. And mine was still being written. My name is Eleanor Grace Whitfield, and if you've followed this far, you know now that my story is not the triumphant romance I once imagined. It is not the tale of a girl who lost a boy and then won him back in some sweeping, cinematic ending. No, the truth of my life is quieter, sharper, and, I think, more honest. Matthew Cole never returned to me. His life moved forward as though I had been a mere chapter, not the whole book. And oh, how my pride once railed against that truth. But as years have passed, I have begun to see it differently. Sometimes, love is not meant to be kept. Sometimes it is meant to break you open, to force you into a kind of reckoning you would never arrive at on your own. Matthew was that for me, a mirror I once turned away from only to find it reflecting my flaws years later. I still think of him. When I pass by a mechanic's shop and smell the oil-stained air, when I hear laughter too easy to ignore, when I see someone rise from nothing and make the world notice. He drifts through the corners of my memory not as the man I once belittled, nor the man who later stood beyond my reach, but as both. Both truths exist. Both truths shape me. And me? My life has become something new. Not glamorous, no. Not the glossy picture I once chased with such hunger. but true. I left the glimmering halls of advertising after a few years. The corporate grind that had once been proof of success began to feel like a cage. Instead, I returned to the Midwest. This time, not to shrink back into smallness, but to build something of my own. I now run a modest little creative firm out of Indianapolis, helping local businesses tell their stories without the gloss and glitter of empty slogans. Honest work. Work that feels like my own voice. Sometimes my mother watches me with quiet satisfaction, as though she knew all along that the restless girl would circle back to her roots not as a failure, but as someone who had finally learned where she belonged. Do I still regret losing Matthew? Yes. Regret is a ghost I'll carry until the end of my days. But regret is no longer my prison. It is my teacher. The last time I heard his name was in an article about philanthropy, how his company had opened a scholarship fund for underprivileged kids who dreamed of technology careers. I smiled when I read it, though the smile was bittersweet. It suited him to turn his success into soil where others might grow. And maybe that's the real ending of this story. His path went one way, mine another. We parted as two people who once collided in youth, burned bright then, broke apart. Yet in breaking away, we became the truest versions of ourselves. So here I stand, telling you this as the narrator of my own life, no longer chasing the glitter I once thought defined me. My story is not one of reclaimed love, but of reclaimed self. And in many ways, that is the greater victory. Because love lost may still hurt, but to lose yourself is far worse. And I, Eleanor Grace Whitfield, refuse to be lost any longer.